What's up guys, today we're going over the pre-release guide for the new 4-star character coming in version 7.0, Alyosha. If you find this video useful, please consider subscribing to support my channel. Now let's jump right into it. Alyosha is a 4-star electro polearm character. He has a very high base HP, the second highest base attack among all 4-star characters, and a solid defense as well. His ascension stat is energy recharge, reaching up to 26.7%. It's actually been a long time since we had a 4-star with energy recharge as their ascension stat. Genshin was the last one. His normal attacks are just your standard physical attacks that scale with attack. Nothing special or particularly relevant, except for the final hit of his combo. I will explain why later. Also, having a off-field support staying on field long enough to perform an entire normal attack combo is pretty awkward. His elemental skill can either be tapped or held. Tapping, it deals electro damage to the enemy in front of him, while holding it charge up a stronger AoE attack. The downside is that the charge version takes time, so in most situations you will simply tap it once. Holding it is only really worth considering when you're fighting multiple enemies. No matter which version you use, every enemy hit receives a hunter's mark for 15 seconds. It marks the enemy, and if that marked enemy is hit by a hunter's mark again, it triggers an effect that grants the entire party an attack buff for 15 seconds, and the skill has a 15 seconds cooldown. This is actually one of Alyosha's biggest problems at C0, but we will get back to that in a moment. First, let's take a look at his elemental burst. When cast, Alyosha summons his dog, Tugarin. Within an area in front of Tugarin, he will continuously attack enemies while also taunting them, forcing nearby enemies to target him instead. It's similar to abilities like Amber's and Ganyu's elemental skill or Ororon's elemental burst. Both Tugarin's summon damage and his continuous attack scale with Alyosha's attack. He stays on field for 14 seconds, has an 18 seconds cooldown, and required 70 energy to cast. Now, on to his passive talents. Whenever Tugarin attacks, he restored HP to the entire party based on a percentage of Alyosha's attack. Another passive increases the damage of both his elemental skill and elemental burst by 0.35% for every 1% of energy recharge he has, up to a maximum of 70% bonus damage, which is reached at 200% energy recharge. Finally, one of his passives states that if Alyosha is inside the pole-star field, triggering Hunter's Mark grant the entire party 25% stellar conduct damage bonus, on top of the attack buff it already provides. What's a pole-star field? The area created by stellar conduct damage, and that's his entire kit. But I will say it right now, at Z0, Constellation 0, Alyosha feels incomplete. Why? Because if you play him the way a support is supposed to be played, using his elemental skill, elemental burst, before swapping out, you actually can't reliably provide the party-wide attack buff or the stellar conduct damage bonus, the Hunter's Mark. Hunter's Mark can only be triggered in two ways: by using his elemental skill or by landing the final hit of his normal attack combo. That's the interaction I mentioned earlier. So at Constellation 0, his rotation is to perform a full normal attack combo, then use both his ability before swapping out. For a support, that's pretty clunky. Fortunately, that changes with Constellations. Let's go through them. Constellation 1 restore 15 energy to Alyosha every 18 seconds whenever your team triggers any electro-related reaction. At Constellation 2, extends Tugarin's duration from 14 seconds to 20 seconds, and every time Tugarin's attack, he applies Hunter's Mark. This is where Alyosha finally starts becoming a unit worth investing in. One important detail though, this constellation applies the mark, but it doesn't trigger its effect. Because of that, your rotation changes. You will want to cast his elemental burst first, then his elemental skill, and immediately swapping him out. Constellation 3 increases his elemental skill by 3 levels, which is actually pretty valuable since higher skill level mean a stronger attack buff from Hunter's Mark. The Constellation 4 provides additional healing to the party member with the lowest HP every time Tugarin lands an attack. The Constellation 5 is simply 3 levels to his elemental burst, nothing too exciting here. Then there's a Constellation 6. Hunter's Mark can now stack twice, and everyone affected by it also gain 100 elemental mastery. So at Constellation 6, Alyosha provides attack, stellar conduct damage bonus, and elemental mastery to the entire team with excellent uptime. He basically goes from feeling underwhelming to become an incredibly strong stellar conduct support. So yeah, Alyosha is amazing at Constellation 2 or higher. Anything below that is pretty meh. His build is pretty straightforward. You can either give him the new artifact set coming in version 7.0, or just like I did when calculating a team with Zandrone, Yamiko, and Adetta, you can run Noblesse Oblige. Either option works, it simply depends on the rest of the team. For main stat, you will want Energy Recharge Sense, an Attack Goblet, and either Attack or Crit Circlet. Honestly, it doesn't really matter since he isn't dealing much damage anyway. Going with Attack simply gives you more healing, which can definitely be appreciated in some cases. I honestly don't think Alyosha will be all that relevant outside of Stellar Conduct teams. That said, that's about everything I can say about him for now. Of course, he isn't just useful with Zandrone, he also works well with Riofle and Sinu, since they both benefit from Stellar Conduct. Just don't get one thing confused. Alyosha does not enable a Stellar Conduct simply by being on the team. That's still exclusive to Zandrone and Adetta. The good news is that if you're pulling for Adetta, who has excellent synergy with Alyosha, you are much more likely to get him to at least Constellation 2, and that's where he really starts to shine. And that's all for now, everyone. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.